Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Shri Shailabhijanamburashishasinam Sri Krishna Tatatmajam Sri Shailanve Devanath Sudhiya Praptagamantadvayam Padabje Narsimha Tataya Guroho Nyastatma Rakshabharam Vidvadvranda Chakora Chandiramaham Ramanujaryam Shraye Sriranga Sudha Madhusamaswadayantam Sriranga Mahishi Padapankajatmajam Sulabhashrayam Sadamoda Siddhamadbhutam Bhajeham Gurum Tam Ranganatha Priyam Sukhasanastham Hridayabja Pithe Chinmudraya Lankrita Pani Padmam Shubhopavitam Vimalortha Pundram Namami Rangam Gurum Antarenge Namami Yoga Samrajñim Vijayam Vijayapradam Srirangardha Sanasinam Karuna Mama Mataram Guru Rupa Paranjyotihi Jyoti Rupa Guru Paraha Ajnana Mandiram Chetate Guru Vijnana Mandiram Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhaite Girim Yatkripa Tamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam Yontah Pravishya Mama Vachamimam Prasuptam Sanjeevayatyakila Shaktidhara Swadhamna Anyamsha Hasta Charana Shravanatvagaadine Pranan Namo Bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullara Vindayata Patra Netra Yenatvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajwalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha. Salutations to our Guru and the Guru of all Gurus. Let us commence our session today. Just give me a minute. In the last class, we had concluded on Purushottama Yoga, where the sum and substance of the previous chapter is the fact that the Supreme Lord resides in each and every jiva. He is the person who is responsible for giving us the jnanam, and then smriti. He is also responsible for apohanam. And the need for us to understand the fact that he resides in us in the prakriti as various agnis, pranas, shaktis, ojas, tejas, everything. And it is important to, look at striving to understand who he is. And he clearly explains that there are, different types of purushas. One who is ever in samsara, the other who is a muktatma, and the third that he is the supreme all-pervading person. The other interpretation is that the Atman dilutes himself as being in samsara and takes different bodies. And there is a point where it realizes that it is different from Prakriti. And there is yet another state which is beyond the aspect of getting into samsara. That's the Advaitic interpretation. However, it is important to know that Yomameva asammudhaha janati purushottamam sa sarvavit bhajati mam sarvabhavena bharata. It is important to incorporate the aspect of knowing this Supreme Being. and that is the source of all knowledge. You become a Sarvavit, and having become a Sarvavit, one will not be idle. What you will do is you will indulge in his service. That is the most important thing here. This is not a matter of acquiring knowledge or experience for its own sake, but also dedicate ourselves. Sarva Bhavena Bharata. We have to involve in his service through bhakti or bhajanai. Bhajati mam sarva bhavena bharata. The other meaning of bhajanai is to enjoy him. Enjoy him in various forms. அதாவது ஒன்று நம்ம உள்ள இருக்கிற ஆத்மாவை அனுபவிக்கிறது, இன்னொன்று இதே ஆத்மா தான் எல்லா ஜீவன்கள்லையும் இருக்கு அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு பாவத்தில் பக்தி செலுத்துறதுங்கிறது அது தட் இஸ் தி ஹையஸ்ட் ஃபார்ம் ஆஃப் பக்தி. ஏற்கனவே சொல்லியிருக்கார் இல்லையா, வாசுதேவ சர்வமிதி ச மகாத்மா சுதுர்லபா அப்படின்னு சொல்லியிருக்கார். ஸோ தட் இஸ் தி ஹையஸ்ட் ஃபார்ம் ஆஃப் பக்தி. டு ரியலைஸ் தி third thing that he said, அக்ஷராதபி சோத்தமஹா அப்படின்னு சொல்றாரு இல்லையா, அந்த ஸ்டேட்டுக்கு போகிறது ரொம்ப ரொம்ப கஷ்டம். அந்த ஸ்டேட்டுக்கு போயிட்டாருனாக்கா he becomes the Lord himself. இதி குஹ்யதமம் சாஸ்திரம் இதமுக்தம் மயானக ஏதத் புத்வா புத்திமான் ஸ்யாத் கிருதகிருத்யஸ்ச பாரத. You will be known as somebody who has performed what you are supposed to do only when you understand this most secret of all knowledges. அப்படின்னு அர்த்தம் அதுக்கு. கிருதகிருத்யஹானாக்கா you have achieved what you are supposed to achieve as a jivatma, and you will become the most intelligent person. In the sense, உன்னுடைய புத்தி ஸ்திரமா இருக்கும். And இந்த சாஸ்திரமானது யாருக்கு கொடுக்கணும்னு இருக்காங்க. யார் அனகாலா இருக்காளோ, those who are blemishless, they are worthy of instructing this particular shastra. And there was some discussion in the last class around, if something is so secret, how come it is made open? It is kind of open secret. Yeah, today anybody can you can Google, download Bhagavad Gita, various commentaries, irrespective of your affiliation to any matam. So what is the meaning of it being so secret? Abhinaka, there is one aspect of understanding this from an intellect perspective. The other aspect is that of indulging in it and trying to realize exactly what the Lord is saying. அது புத்தியை தாண்டி இருக்கக்கூடிய அனுபவ க்ஷேத்திரத்துக்கு போகிறது தான் குஹ்யதமம். தட் இஸ் நாட் ஈஸிலி அட்டைனபிள், அண்ட் தட் கால்ஸ் ஃபார் ரிகரஸ் ப்ராக்டிஸ், ஸ்பிரிச்சுவல் ப்ராக்டிஸ். ஸோ தட்ஸ் த ரீசன் வை இட் டசன்ட் மேட்டர் whether it is made known in public. It matters as to whether you perceive the thread of thought and practice that the Lord has laid in his divine words. Therefore, it will forever remain Guhyatamam. Only with the grace of the Guru and the Lord, we will be able to realize the true inner meaning of all of this. So that's why it is known as a Guhyatamam Shastram. Any questions before we proceed to the next chapter? If there are no questions, we will start the next chapter. This is the 16th chapter. It is known as Daivasura Sampat Vibhaga Yogaha. And by definition, what it means is it is a chapter that helps us to distinguish between divine and demonic qualities and attributes. What is Devi Sampat? What is Asuri Sampat? So as usual, we look at Yamunacharya's shloka, which summarizes the 16th chapter, and then we'll get into the 16th chapter. Devasura vibhagokti purvika shastravashyata tatvanusthana vijnana sthemne shodasa uchyate. So what Acharya Yamuna is saying through this shloka is Devasura vibhaga ukti purvika. This chapter clearly distinguishes the two aspects of Daivam and Asuram. And it also talks about Shastra Vashyata, the fact that there is something known as Shastram, and we'll talk about that in detail in this chapter. And the fact that if we were to adopt what is actually Shastram, then you will rid yourself of the Asuri gunas and you can fill yourself with Daivi gunas. And Shastram is something which is sacred, and it is something that helps us if we adopt it. Shasanat trananat chaiva shastramit abhidiyate. That which if we follow will help us to protect ourselves from various things. And the Lord will illustrate as to what exactly is Shastram and how are we supposed to follow in this chapter. அதுக்கு அடுத்தது தத்வானுஷ்டான விஜ்ஞான ஸ்தேம்னே ஷோடச உச்சதே. And how are we supposed to follow the various tattvas is also illustrated in this chapter. அதுக்குண்டான விஜ்ஞானம் என்ன? What is the science behind it? And sthemne, how are we supposed to establish in it? Having known what it is, how do we establish ourselves in it? All of these are described in this 16th chapter. So in summary, this chapter talks about the differences between Daivam and Asuri Sampat. What is the science behind acquiring these two types of qualities? How do we interweave this with various tattvas? All of these are described in this chapter, and the science behind it. As usual, the last shloka in the previous chapter, iti guhyatamam shastram idamuktam mayanagha etad buddhva buddhiman syat kritakrityascha bharata. Bhagavan is a supreme being who is beyond various other types of beings. அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு அவரை அடையறதுக்கு உண்டான மார்க்கம் என்ன? What are the means of attaining him? அப்படின்னு ஒரு கொஸ்டின் வரும். And he talks about the word Shastra there. And this chapter is an extension of that one particular theme of Shastra. And we have to be clear regarding what exactly is this Shastram. Therefore, he gives a very clear step-by-step approach of adopting various things, positive things, of being mindful of the negative things. That's equally important. That is why this chapter is a logical continuation of the previous chapter. Om Shri Bhagavan Vacha Abhayam Sattva Samshuddhihi Jnana Yoga Vyavasthitihi Dhanam damascha yajnascha swadhyayas tapa arjavam. From sloka number 1 onwards up to sloka number 3, he describes the various Daivi Sampat, divine wealth of qualities. அப்படின்னு சொல்லிக்கலாம். So let's look at, so இதுல தெய்வம் அசுரம் அப்படின்னு சொல்றது, what do they in general connote to us? What is Daivi and what is Asuri? அப்படின்னாக்கா, தெய்வம்னா that which relates to Devatas. Asuramna that which relates to Asuras. But if you were to look at what exactly it means, தெய்வம்னு சொன்னாக்கா தேவதைகள். யாரு தேவதைகள் அப்படின்னா 33 கோடி தேவதைகள் இருக்கா, எல்லாருக்கும் தெரியும் இல்லையா? But if you were to look at who these devatas are, each one is a particular form of Shakti, and they are the overlord of that Shakti. And where do these Shaktis reside? They reside not only externally in the macrocosm, but also within us. And therefore, they help us to acquire the positive abilities to eventually see the divine. The divine அப்படிங்கிற வேர்டே சம்ஸ்கிருதத்திலேருந்து வந்ததுதான். தேவதா அப்படின்னு சொல்றோம் இல்லையா? திவு அப்படின்னாலே பிரகாசம் அப்படின்னு அர்த்தம். அந்த பிரகாசத்துக்கு கிட்ட எதெல்லாம் கொண்டு போறதோ, that which provides us with light is known as divine and is indeed known as Daivi Sampat. Asuram அப்படின்னாக்கா ந சுரஹ அசுரஹ, that which is not divine. சுராஹ அப்படின்னா தேவதைகளுக்கு இன்னொரு அர்த்தம். That which is not divine is called Asuri Sampat, that which leads you to darkness and not light, that which makes you heavy. Light க்கு opposite heavy இல்லையா? Will become heavy in everything if we were to adopt those which are not divine. அதோட கேட்டகரைசேஷன்ல முதல்ல ஆரம்பிச்சு என்ன சொல்றார்? அபயம் அப்படின்னு ஆரம்பிக்கிறார். அபயம் சத்வ சம்சுத்திஹி ஞானயோக வியவஸ்திதிஹி. The very first attribute of divinity is being rid of fear. One who is fearless அப்படின்னு ஆரம்பிக்கிறார். அப்படின்னா என்ன அர்த்தம்? Who can be fearless? அப்படின்னா there are many types of people who are fearless. If you were to look at our own day-to-day lives, any child, less than 5 years old, you show any object to it and you ask that child to do anything, it will go ahead and do that activity and indulge itself in that particular thing. So being somebody like a child gives you a state of fearlessness. And why is a child fearless? அப்படின்னு பார்த்தாக்கா, that is a stage of life where you are very inquisitive. You are exploring things. There is nothing that you lose. It only tries to acquire knowledge of new things and experience of things. Therefore, a child is fearless. So that is one state where you are indeed in a state of abhayam. The other state of fearlessness is at the other extreme. Die, யார் எவன் வந்தாலும் நான் பார்த்துக்கிறேன் அப்படின்னு சொல்லி, the sense of fearlessness which comes out of pure ignorance. You may not know that you do not really possess those attributes of taking care of yourself and others, but you try to demonstrate that fearlessness. So that and sometimes It also happens that there are fools who do not know anything about a system, and therefore they are fearless. Okay, so that is another state where somebody is fearless. இதெல்லாம் தாண்டி, if you look at in general, every one of us, we all have fear of some form. We are afraid of many things in life. We have our own expectations. When we meet somebody, we don't know what that person will think of us. இந்த மாதிரி நிறைய expectations and appointments நம்ம மனசுல இருக்கும். And if I were to ask you, to fill up the blanks, if I say fear of dash, Adina, what is the most common word that you can use there? It is the fear of, you can unmute and say, what's the most common form of fear?
Death.
Fear of death.
Death.
Okay. What else do we have fear of?
Unknown. Fear of the unknown.
Very good. So we all have fear of death and fear of the unknown. Yenaka, this jiva takes this body. Somewhere embedded in its own psyche is the fact that this body is not eternal. அது நிறைய பார்த்துடுது. அதனால நம்ம கிட்ட சொல்லிட்டே இருக்கோம், ஐயோ, this body is not eternal, it may leave us, I may leave it someday. அதனால தான் அந்த fear இருக்கு. That fear has to be overcome. Likewise, equally important is the fear of the unknown. When we do not know what is in front of us, we are terrified. It can be a simple thing like, there is a machine. I give you a new machine to you and ask you to operate. You may be aware of other machines. I don't want to deal with this. I don't know what it is. Yeah, you become suddenly withdrawn, and it results in this aspect of fear. So how do you develop a sense of fearlessness? Is very, very simple. We have to understand what is making us fearful. What is the cause of this fear? And then how do we address it? So if we have the fear of death, we should think of how do we become Amritam? How do we transcend death? அப்படிங்கிறத பற்றி நம்ம யோசிக்க ஆரம்பிச்சோம்னா அந்த ஃபியர் பறந்து போயிடும். அதே மாதிரி ஃபியர் ஆஃப் unknown அப்படின்றதுனா very simple. Try to acquire knowledge. You become skillful in what is causing that fear. Once you are completely knowledgeable about what you're dealing with, then you will get into a state of fearlessness. But it is very, very intriguing as to why the Lord starts with Abhayam as the first and foremost aspect of, somebody who is a divine person. இப்போ தேவதைகள் பார்த்தாங்கனாக்கா, they actually, each of the devatas, they are fearless. They know that they possess that strength and they can vanquish an asura who is exactly the opposite of that divine person. Every devata shakti has a portfolio. அந்த போர்ட்ஃபோலியோக்கு எதிராக நிற்கக்கூடிய ஒரு அசுரனும் இருப்பான். இப்போ இந்திரன்னா இந்திரனுடைய போர்ட்ஃபோலியோக்கு எதிராக இருக்கக்கூடிய ஒரு அசுரன் இருப்பான். அக்னினா அக்னிக்கு எதிராக இருக்கக்கூடிய அசுரன் ஒருத்தன் இருப்பான். When they meet equal to equal, the devatas know that they are more powerful. Therefore, they have that fearlessness automatically in them. But however, if they were to meet with somebody who is more powerful than them, then even devatas have that fear. And in most of the Puranas, we see that whenever there is an asura who is more powerful than them, they all run, they all rush to either Brahma, Vishnu or Maheshwara. So the concept of fearlessness does not only exist for humans, but also for devatas. And if you were to look at how you actually attain the ultimate sense of fearlessness, the answer is there in the Taittiriya Upanishad. And what is that suktam? Om yada hyevaish etasminnadrishe natme nirukte nilayane bhayam pratishtam vindate athaso bhayangato bhavati yada hyevaish etasminnudaramantaraṁ kurute athatasya bhayam bhavati. It very clearly states who gets into a state of fear and who can transcend the state of fear. என்ன சொல்றது அப்படின்னாக்கா, whenever just to give an analogy before I explain this, a child who is not, let's say, an infant, the child knows who its surroundings, where it lives and who its parents are and so on, also has a sense of fearlessness. And what is the reason for that fearlessness? It knows that there is somebody who can take care of it. It knows that come what may, I have my parents who take care of me. And I am in an environment which helps me to live safely and securely. That concept is what is extended in this suktam in Taittiriya Upanishad, which says, whenever you differentiate between yourself and the Divine Lord, you think that he is far away from you, that you are different from him, then you get into a state of fear. The bhayam garde eppa varuna udaram antaram kurute. When you differentiate that I am different from the Divine Lord, I do not belong to him, I am separate from him, it creates a sense of fear in you. And when you actually become one with him, nirukte nilayane abhayam patishtham vindate. Niruktam and nilayanam, those are the two attributes of the Supreme Lord. Niruktam abhinaka, that which is beyond the state of words, that which is indescribable. Nilayanam abhinaka, one who is actually the end goal. Nilayam, layam. So that Supreme Being, once you know him, once you know that you are part of him, you are not separate from him, you enter into a state of abhayam. So that's why probably the Lord starts with abhayam as the first and foremost divine attribute. If you were to look at the commentaries of the acharyas, ishta nishta viyoga samyoga rupasya dukkhasya hetu darshanajam dukkham bhayam tan nivrittihi abhayam. What he says, what Acharya Ramanuja says, for example, is ishta nishta viyoga samyoga rupasya dukkhasya. So there is an aspect of sorrow that you have to overcome. And he says that sorrow actually leads you to bhayam. And what is the cause of sorrow? The cause of sorrow is the attachment to ishtam and anishtam. You have your own likes and dislikes. Viyoga samyoga rupasya. There are aspects, there are stages of life where you are extremely attached to something and you get detached from something. All these dualities result in unhappiness or sorrow. And the more you probe into the unhappiness, the more you get into a state of bhayam. And tan nivrittihi abhayam. When you try to escape from that state of dukkham, when you do not brood over the causes of displeasure, that will result in a state of abhayam. In other words, in the spiritual sadhana, most of us try to brood over our past. What Acharya says is that past is past. Don't worry about it. Have a state of happiness that I want to get away from that sorrow. Let me step into the field of pleasure and ultimate pleasure. And that is a state of abhayam. It's a positive way of looking at sadhana. The next quality the Lord says is sattva samshuddhi. Sattva samshuddhi அப்படின்னா நம்ம கிட்ட இருக்கக்கூடிய 3 குணங்கள் சத்துவம், ரஜஸ், tamas. We have seen the 3 gunas. It is important to stay focused on sattvika gunam, and you have to ensure that samshuddhi, that sattvam is protected in all circumstances. That you are always aware of rajas and tamas, the fact that they are weeds, they can grow anytime, and their habit is to grow around you, in you, etc. And the fact that you should get rid of them and acquire sattva gunam, that should be the foremost goal of a divine person. So sattva samshuddhi. And how are you supposed to ensure that sattvam is preserved? Abdinaka panchendriyasya dehasya buddhehe manasastatha dravyadesha kriyanam cha shuddhir achara ishyate. According to Ayurveda Shastra, what is acharam? Abdinaka, one way is to look at it as orthodoxy, cleanliness. But cleanliness of what? Abdina panchendriyasya dehasya. You are supposed to keep your body clean, all the indriyas clean, your intellect clean, buddhehe manasastata. Your mind should also be clean. Not only these are all our internal tattvas, but we mingle with things, people, etc. on a day-to-day basis. There is a macrocosm. Dravya desha kriyanancha shuddhihi. You have to ensure that whatever you consume as dravya, the items that we, partake of, we cook, we eat, or we touch, etc. Whatever we feed our senses, those are called as dravyas. Desha, wherever we go, deshamna space, whichever space we go, every land that we step into has its own characteristics. So deshathukum ஒரு விதமான சுத்தி இருக்கு. There are tirtha kshetras, there is our own home, there is a play field. Each one of these has its own characteristics. So we should ensure that wherever we land, we should think of how can we get attached to purity. Desham. மூன்றாவது kriyai. Whatever acts we do, how are we supposed to do it in a pure manner? Dravyam, desham, and kriya. இது மூணும் சுத்தமா இருந்து பஞ்சேந்திரியஸ்ய தேஹஸ்ய புத்தேஹே மனஹா, இது எல்லாமும் சுத்தமா இருந்தா தான் அதுக்கு பேர் ஆச்சாரம். That will ensure that your sattva is purified. Sattvam is shuddham. But something which really helps in all of this is jnana yoga vyavasthitihi, that you are in a state of meditation that results in jnana yoga. அதுக்குண்டான ஏற்பாடு பண்ணிக்கக்கூடியது is the third thing that confers you divinity. தானம். தானம் அப்படின்னாக்கா, what is தானம்? We have giving. Dhanam is giving. Giving னு சொன்னாலே, can we give out of nothingness? No. We give from what we have acquired. நம்ம அக்வயரே பண்ணிக்காத இன்னொருத்தருக்கு நம்ம கொடுக்க கூடாது, கொடுக்க முடியாது. கொடுத்தா மாதிரி it becomes hypocrisy. But it is important to understand that dhanam starts with arjanam. Arjanam naka, you have to first of all acquire something. It can be wealth, it can be knowledge, it can be anything else. We have to first acquire it. and ensure that you understand it, you enjoy it first. Then whatever else is left over, that which with a large heart, you should share it with others without expecting any results from that, without being mindful of the fact that I am not interested in the outcomes of this dhanam. And the dhanam na enna detail la solla porar. But the definition is nyayarjita dhanasya patre prati pradhanam. So there is an aspect of giving. Abdina, there are three things. What are they? There is an object that you are giving, an object that you have acquired, you are giving. That is the first thing. Second thing, there is a giver. One who is giving is part of dhanam. And the third is patram. Who are you giving this dhanam to? In the moondrume, they are very, very critical in terms of determining the efficacy of this whole process. And the highlight pandrathu Kathopanishadla, we know what happened to Nachiketa, right? His father was giving away emaciated cows to various Brahmins, and he was giving it as dhanam, with a sense of ego. And there, everything was wrong. The item that was given away was not the proper item. They were not cows which were, healthy. They were cows which are almost on the path of leaving the earth. Andamari cows are kuduthirukkaru. Rendavadu, the giver, he was not in a proper state of mind. His ego was overpowering. Probably the only thing that was good here was the patram. Those who were receiving it, unfortunately, were learned Brahmins. Okay. But for the dhanam to be effective, all three have to be in synchronization. They should all be in a particular state. Only then the particular dhanam will have made any impact. Another apatrathukku dhanam kodukudadunu solva. We should look at who we are giving it to. We should also give with a sense of detachment. Apperpetadukku per dhaan dhanam. அடுத்தது தமஹா, தமஸ்ச யஜ்ஞஸ்சன்னு சொல்றாரு. தமஹா அப்படின்னா என்னது? தமஹா in general means control. மனசஹ விஷயோன்முக்ய நிவிருத்தி சம்சீலனம் is damaha. When the mind can control itself away from the sense objects and it gets into a state of nivritti. There is pravritti and nivritti. Pravritti is going forward into the field of prakriti. Nivritti is a reverse direction. You are getting into a state of contemplation. So if your mind can get into such a state of getting detracted from the sense objects, then it is supposed to have acquired a state of damaha. அடுத்தது யஜ்ஞஸ்ச. Yajnaha is another divine quality that we should strive to achieve. Here, it is actually a form of karma more than quality. Yajnaha, we have seen already in very much of detail. There are 5 types of yajnas. What are they? Can anybody relate what those 5 types of yajnas are?
Deva yajna, Brahma yajna, Pitru yajna,
yes.
Bhuta yajna.
Bhuta yajna.
Manushya yajna.
Manushya yajna. Those are the 5 types of yajnas. And in general, it means sacrifice. But yajna, as it has multiple, if you were to look at a yajna, the way it is performed, irrespective of which yajna it is, Deva yajna, Pitra yajna, etc., there is an aspect of, Shraddha and Bhakti in that yajna. So we should definitely incorporate those two as part of performing these yajnas. And there is a very detailed suktam that talks about what true yajnam is. We can take a look at it at some point, but it's an extremely important way of understanding yajnam. I'll just probably chant that mantram and give you a gist of what it is. Okay, some of you may have heard this mantram, especially during detailed pujas performed by various acharyas. Okay. Om Tasyaivam vidusho yajnasyaatma yajamana shraddha patni shariramidhvamuro vedillomani barhir vedashikha hridayanyo pakkama ajyam anyo pashustapo nishamayita Dakshina Vaghota Pranavudghata Chakshuraಧ್ವರ್ಯುರ್ಮನೋ Brahma Shrotramakni Vyavatriyate Sa Diksha Idashnati Yat Pibati Tadasya Somapanam Yadramate Tadupasado Yat Sancharatyupavishatyuttishthate Cha Sapravarjo Yanmukham Tadavaniyo Yadasya Vijnanam Tajjuhoti Yat Sayam Pratarati Tat Samidho Yat Sayam Pratar Madhyandinam Chatani Savanani Ye Ahoratre Te Darsha Purnamasav Ye Erthamasascha Masascha Te Chaturmasya Niyartavaste Pashubandhaye Samvatsarascha Parivatsarascha Te Harganas Sarvaveda Samva Etachatram Yanmaranam Tadavabhuta Etadvaijaramariamagnihotragam Chatram Yayevam Vitvanu Dagayane Pramiyate Devanameva Mahimanam Gatva Dityasya Sayujjam Gachatyathyo Dakshine Pramiyate Pitrinameva Mahimanam Gatva Chandramasas Sayujjam Gachatyeto Vaisurya Chandramasor Mahimanau Brahmano vidvan abhijayati tasmaad brahmano mahimanamapnoti tasmaad brahmano mahimanamityupanishat. What this talks about is the fact that yajna is something that actually doesn't need any external ingredients. All that is required to perform this yajna are verily there in our body. And the true yajamana, or the one who performs this sacrifice, tasyevam vidusho yajnasya atma, our own jivatma is the performer, the yajamana of this sacrifice. And who is the patni? Every yajna requires a yajamana and a dharma patni. அவ ரெண்டு பேர் இல்லைன்னாக்கா யாகம்ங்கிறது கிடையாது. அதனால்தான் எனி யாகம் you have an equal participation of both the husband and the wife. In fact, very clearly the Smriti Grantha state, if somebody doesn't have a wife, he cannot perform some forms of yagas. The person is forbidden from performing yajnas. But internally, who is the patni for the yajamana? அப்படின்னு பார்த்தா ஸ்ரத்தாதான் பத்னி. The faith with which we do this sacrifice, that is the patni. Yajamana shraddha patni. And then shariram idhmam. This body is like the samit that we put into the fire. Our body is that idhmam. அப்படின்னு சொல்லி போயிட்டே இருக்கும். It describes all the aspects of a yajnam and finally says that we offer this to that divine Agni or the divine Brahman, and one who knows this is a true Brahmana. That is what this Suktam says. And that is the kind of yajna that we should all eventually aspire to do. The next quality, he says, is Swadhyaya. This comes as part of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. It is part of the yamas and yamas, I think, isn't it? Yeah. Niyamas. It is part of the niyamas. But from a Vedic perspective, the meaning of Swadhyaya is you are taught Vedas by a guru, and the guru can only so much teach you, isn't it? But it is up to you to go back to your home and do homework. And what type of homework are you supposed to do? You have to repeat whatever the Acharya has told you. You have to keep repeating. That is called Swadhyaya. That is self-study. Whatever the guru teaches you, it is important for us to do some rumination, self-study. And in fact, Swadhyaya pravachanabhyam na pramaditavyam. Abdine Taitri Upanishathile sollirukku. Swadhyaya is very, very important because we have to preserve Vedas and the dharmas associated with Veda. Therefore, the Vedic connotation of Swadhyaya is to spend a lot of time on understanding what the Guru is teaching, repeat what he is teaching, and ensure that you are able to then sustain and propagate Vedas. The yogic meaning of Swadhyaya is being aware of oneself, that you can study where your state of the mind is. Are you in Rajas, Tamas, or are you in Sattva? Or are you beyond all these gunas into a state of absorbing yourself into meditation? That is known as Swadhyaya. Of course, there are lots of deeper meanings of Swadhyaya. If you were to look at the Bhashya of Patanjali Yoga Sutra, that is for some other date and time. But it's important to note that Swadhyaya is a divine quality, a Daivi Sampat. Therefore, we should strive to attain this particular Sampat. Arthadu Tapaha. Tapaha abhinaka in the penance. The fact that you adopt a strict regime and discipline, and you ensure that whatever you have strived to achieve through Swadhyaya and the other previous gunas, Sattva Samshuddhi, Jnana Yoga, etc., that is something which is pursued without any hindrance. That is what is the quality of tapas. Tapas illana baki ellame prayojanam kedaiyadhu.
Tapas is practice.
Tapas is actually, yes, it is practice.
Tapas is meditation, but we are practicing that. It is not the state of samadhi, but it is a practice.
It is practice. It is striving to actually, in the previous gunas la sollirukkom illaya, danam, damaha, yajnaha, abhayam. Adu ellame, they are not, one time activities. Oru tharam panna porom அப்படிங்கிறது கிடையாது. அதை சஸ்டெயின்டா கண்டினியூஸா பண்றதுக்கு உண்டான சக்திக்கு பேர் தான் தபஸ். It is actually the other form of tapaha. Tapahana fire அப்படின்னு அர்த்தம். That fire to continue and be in a state of divine qualities, Daivi Sampat, is actually tapaha. In some sense, this is the most important Daivi Sampat. Tapas does not only mean you are a recluse, you go and hide somewhere and close your eyes, but your mind is quite wide open to everything else. Yeah, that alone is not tapas. But when you are wakeful, when you are in this world and interacting and engaging in various activities, how would you still continue to have abhayam, sattva samshuddhi? Because we should remember that there is always an eternal onslaught of Prakriti. The nature of Prakriti is to distract the Jivatma from its true spirit, true experience, etc. Without tapas, the Jivatma, unfortunately, will never be able to realize its true nature. That's the reason why tapaha is also a divine quality that we should all strive to attain. Tapaha abdingaradhukku Kritsra Chandrayana Dwadashya upavasadehe bhagavat preenana karma yogyata vadanasya karanam. That is, when you are adopting the various yajnas like Krichram, Chandrayanam, ityadi yajnangalna nama pandrache, the fact that we are doing it in order to please the divine Lord is what constitutes tapas. Abdingarde is Acharya Ramanuja's commentary. Shankara Bhagavad Padarde, tapas means you have to become somebody who can control your mind, withdraw yourselves in such a manner that you can dedicate yourself into Atma Sadhana. That is called as tapaha. But ultimately, we can, in simplistic terms, you can think of it as a fire that is important to pursue all other sattvic gunas. அடுத்தது ஆர்ஜவம். ஆர்ஜவம்னா என்னது? It is being very simple, not being crooked is arjavam. Manovakaya karma vrittinam ekanishtata pareshu. You are one in your thought, word and deed. That actually is what is simplicity. It is very easy for others to interpret if you know that what you see is what you get. நம்ம முன்ன ஒன்று சொல்லிட்டு பின்னாடி பேக் ஸ்டாபிங் பண்றதுக்கு பேரு ஆர்ஜவம் கிடையாது. And it is one of the most difficult sattvic gunas to attain. It is not easy to be simple. Whenever we engage ourselves in activities, there's a predominance of our own ego, our own expectations, and that colors the way we interact. The time we listen to Bhagavad Gita, everything will be sweet and eminently something that we should pursue in our life. But after 1 hour, what happens? The மாயைங்கிற போத்தி நம்ம மேல வந்துடும். அதனுடைய வேலையே அதுதான். அது என்ன பண்ணிடும்? It will ensure that we are complex. We are not simple. Being simple is actually very simple. But அது புரியறதுக்கு நம்மளுக்கு குருவுடைய கட்டாட்சம் வேணும். அது எப்படி அதை மனசும் வாக்கும் காயமும் ஐக்கமத்தியத்தோட வேலை பண்ணணும். அதுக்காக தான் சன்னியாசிகளுக்கு திருதண்டம் அப்படிங்கிறது கொடுத்திருக்கிறது. அதுதான், they have to remind themselves that இந்த திரிகரண சுத்திங்கிறது ரொம்ப முக்கியம். That it may be very difficult for grihasthas to get into that state, but as a sannyasi I am supposed to be ever in that state அப்படின்னு சொல்றதுக்காக தான் அந்த திருதண்டம்ங்கிறது. அதை கையை விட்டு போகக்கூடாது அப்படிங்கிறதுக்கு காரணம், இட்ஸ் நாட் பிகாஸ் இட்ஸ் எ ஸ்டிக். It is supposed to remind yourself. It's a stick for your mind. It's a dandam that will tell you that forever you are supposed to be in that spirit. Of course, for grihasthas, there are umpteen opportunities the Lord provides. For a sannyasi, at least it's actually easy. They have taken a vow. They have taken a vow, and they can be very easily in that state. அவளுக்கே அத்தனை ரிமைண்டிங் வேணும். நம்மளுக்கு எவ்வளவு இருக்கணும்னு பாருங்க. பட் fortunately we are given that opportunity to shape our mind. Okay, every time we encounter a conflict between our mind and our word, what are we supposed to do? Just step back. Don't get pulled by prakriti. The nature of prakriti is to pull you into that. Argue. என்னோட மத்தம்தான் சரின்னு சொல்லி பேசு அப்படின்னு சொல்லும் மனசு. அப்போ நாக்கு என்ன பண்ணணும்? யோசிக்கணும். ஐயோ, மனசு சொல்றது தப்பா இருக்கே, நம்ம ஆத்மாவை கேட்டு பார்ப்போம் அப்படின்னு ஒரு செகண்ட் it has to withdraw. If the mind is clear and the tongue is not saying, then the jiva should say, no, you better go and say sorry. தப்பு பண்ணிட்டேன், மனசு சொல்றது ஒத்துக்கிறது, go and say sorry. அப்படிங்கிறது ஆத்மாங்கிறது it should enforce that it comes through the karmendriyas. And of course the speech that we speak, இது மூணுமே ஒருங்கிணைந்து ஒர்க் பண்றதுக்கு பேர் தான் ஆர்ஜவம். It is indeed a daivi quality. In fact, it is not necessary that all the devatas themselves are in that state. ஏன்னா அவளுக்கே சில சமயம் இந்திரனுக்கே கூட it is very difficult. to get into the state of arjavam. But அந்த தெய்வீ குவாலிட்டிஸ் எங்க இருக்கு அப்படின்னு பார்க்கறதுக்கு நிறைய உதாரணங்கள் புராணங்கள்லாம் பார்த்தீங்கன்னாக்கா every great devotee is actually an inspiration for us. How are we supposed to lead our lives? அப்படிங்கிறதுக்கு there are so many moral stories. We all are very familiar with all of them. Only thing is, like a sannyasi has that external stick, it should always be an internal stick for grihasthas. It cannot be a transition. All of us are supposed to go through all 4 ashramas in our life. That was how we used to lead our life: brahmacharyam, grihastham, vanaprastham, and sannyasam. Sannyasam was very common. Everybody used to get into that state previously. And that transition cannot be a discrete and forceful transition. It has to be gradual, continuous. And that can happen only when we appreciate that these are qualities that we are supposed to follow in each and every part of our lives.
Sir, வெங்கட் பேசுறேன்.
சொல்லுங்க
சார். இப்போ நம்மளோட இதுல மனசு, சித்தம், அறிவு, இதை தவிர எண்ணம், இதெல்லாம் வந்துட்டு இருக்கு. அண்ட் ஆப்வியஸ்லி இப்ப இருக்கிற வேர்ல்டுல தர்மம் அதர்மத்தோட லைன்ஸ் தான் ரொம்ப பிளர்டா இருக்கு. எது கரெக்ட் எது தப்புன்னு ரொம்ப பிளர்டா இருக்கு. அண்ட் நம்ம இதுலயே ஒரு எனி திங் பண்றப்ப 2 கான்ஃபிளிக்டிங் தாட்ஸ் வருது. இது பண்றதுக்கு ஒரு ரீசன் வருது, பண்ணக்கூடாதுங்கிறதுக்காக ஒரு இது சொல்றது. ஸோ இப்ப நீங்க சொல்றது இப்ப வந்து மனசுகிட்ட கேட்கணும் அப்படின்னு சொல்றது, இதுன்னு சொல்றது. பட் ஃபார் அஸ் டு ரியலி டிஃபரன்ஷியேட் எது எங்கேருந்து வருதுன்னு நமக்கு ஆக்சுவலா தெரியவே மாட்டேங்குது. ஆக்சுவலா இது சித்தத்துல இருந்து வருதா, இல்ல இது மூளை சொல்றதா, இல்ல மனசு சொல்றதான்னு சொல்லிட்டு யூ ஆர் ஜஸ்ட் bombarded with these thoughts. ஸோ அப்படின்னா யூ கெட் கன்ஃபியூஸ்ட் ஆன் வேர் டு டேக் அ டிசிஷன். அது ஒரு கன்ஃபியூஷன் இருக்குல்ல.
Correct. Yes. Yes. There are more questions. Parliament question. There are sub questions here. Yes, please.
But there's different people think different, like what's good and bad. So an asura would think that killing people is good, but we would think that killing people is bad. So how do you tackle that? Which is the true good and bad?
Very good. So basically that's the fundamental question. How do you differentiate between good and bad? Yes, you had a question.
I did not have a question, but I was thinking that when we address these issues by our individual behavior and our individual at an individualistic level, that takes care of it in a macrocosm level by sticking to our dharma.
Correct.
Whatever confusions we have, whatever troubles we undergo through, whatever pressure tests we go through, it is to be abiding by that which is written in Smritis or by law of nature, probably will show us the path. Maybe the path will not be an easier path. Might not be arjavam to go through, but that would be the way of life.
So yes, so you are, and then what you said is part of the solution set. So we now heard a couple of problems here. Anybody?
One more, I will ask the question. You can summarize the answer as well. இல்ல இப்போ வந்து the different to differentiate dharma and adharma, right? It is not a universal code of conduct. What is dharma for you may be adharma for me, and adharma for me is dharma for you. So is there is any acid test or set of questions we can ask, a flow chart, that then we can derive some conclusion that yes, I can go ahead. If we are able to highlight, that will be helpful.
Correct. Yes. This this question is as eternal as the fight between devas and asuras. The origin of conflict is actually the fact that there is a differentiation. The moment we get into the state of darkness, it leads to all of this. The moolam for all of this is avidya. But how are we supposed to, what is the touchstone? How do we know what is good and bad? Something which appears to be actually very good for me may not be perceived as such by others. So இதெல்லாம் தான் there are actually aspects of dharma which we have to understand in very great detail, and it will actually take us into the origin of smritis. ஸ்ருதியில சொல்லியிருக்கிறது பகவான் அவருடைய தத்துவம் பிரகிருதிங்கிறது என்ன அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு அதோட முடிஞ்சிடும். How do we adopt it in day-to-day life அப்படிங்கிறது ஸ்மிருதி கிரந்தங்கள்ல வரும். That lays in some sense the code of conduct. However, we are kind of probably a generation above us or 2 generations above us. These were not even questions. It was part and parcel of their observance of day-to-day duties. அவ கொஸ்டினே பண்ணல. ஆபஸ்தம்ப சூத்திரத்தில் சொல்லியிருக்கு அப்படின்னு சொல்லி 3 தரம் இது பண்ணோம், இது குளிச்சுட்டு சந்தியானம் பண்ணிட்டு போயிட்டே இருக்கணும். There is no afterthought or any questions or whatsoever. So they were in some sense leading an arjavam based life. But today we have voluntarily got into conflicts, and that's how I would look at it. We have surrendered to conflicts, and the only way to escape from this is to get into a state of understanding that we are leading a life full of conflicts. Every problem has a solution only when we acknowledge it. The moment we acknowledge there is a problem, then we will seek approaches to solve that problem. And the answer to this question is not straightforward. In fact, the whole of Mahabharata is full of such conflicts. What appears to be relative truth, what is absolute truth, what is relative good, absolute good, and how are we supposed to develop what is known as the dharma niti? How are we supposed to understand what is good and what is bad? Is oftentimes not an easy thing to get into our heads. Yes, Hiranmi.
But conflict is something that helps us learn new things, different perceptions. So conflict is also good, isn't it?
Yes. So conflict is definitely good. If you were to look at how this riddle was solved, we don't have to go anywhere beyond Upanishads. The way it is solved is by the process of inquiry. And inquiry starts with the fact that that there is something that you have to learn. There is a goal for learning. And added to it is the fact that it is okay to make mistakes when you are learning. Learning is a gradual process. It will never happen that you learn things like that, it gets into your head and you are done. அது கிடையவே கிடையாது. இப்போ just to illustrate this, இந்த தைத்திரிய உபனிஷத்துல பிருகுவல்லியில பிருகுர் வைவாருணிஹி அப்படின்னு ஆரம்பிச்சு வருணம் பித்தரம் உபசசாரா அவர் என்ன பண்றார், பிராணோ பிரம்மே திவ்யஜானாத், அன்னத்தை பிரம்மங்கிறார். அவர்கிட்ட போய்க்கிற இல்லை அன்னம் பிரம்மம் கிடையாது, இன்னும் தபஸ் பண்ணிட்டோம் அப்படிங்கிறார். அதுக்கப்புறம் பிராணன், இப்படின்ட்டு கிரடேஷன்ஸ்ல போறது. Therefore, what is good or what is bad அப்படிங்கிறத பார்க்கறதுக்கு we are supposed to get, as Venkat was saying, we actually all have not only one color of specs. Everybody has one different color of spectacles. We wear glasses of different colors, but the object is the same. We are all seeing it differently because we are colored. And there is so much of wheels or walls that we have created between an object and the observer that we no more know what is the true state of the object. And how are we supposed to know what is good or bad? Very simple, that we should develop the process of acquiring knowledge. Knowledge acquisition அப்படின்னு டபுள் quotationல போட்டா அது என்னது, வாட் இஸ் தட் ப்ராசஸ் ஆஃப் நாலேஜ் அக்விசிஷன் அப்படிங்கிறதுல நம்ம மனசு போகணும். அப்படி போச்சுன்னா தான் படிப்படியா while the intellect will keep getting refined, the equally important aspect of teaching us is experience. Every experience that we go through, it actually hammers on the jiva. It creates what is known as a samskara. And through that samskara, the jiva will start learning. And ultimately, the Lord actually has laid a very beautiful path of knowing what is good or bad. And that is nothing but nature. There is no better explanation for what is good or bad. You just have to look at how nature has evolved or continues to evolve. We call it a natural way. Who has taught how a tree should grow? Who has taught an animal as to how it should live its life? There are birds which build such beautiful nests. They build their own homes. Who has taught them all of this? If you look at pigeons, they go and collect these small twigs, and they exactly go back to that place and build a beautiful nest. Anala, Swadhyaya. Yes. So they know that there is a natural way of doing things. So the simple answer to how do you know what is good or bad is anything that is natural is always good. Only that we should understand what is natural. We have come far away from being natural. We have become so artificial that anything naturally proposed to us will look as something which is terrifying. Okay? 10 antibiotics சாப்பிட்டானா ஜுரம் போகும். ஒரு சின்ன ஒரு கஷாயத்தை போட்டு கொடுத்தா போயிடும்னா கேட்க மாட்டோம். ஏன்? We have come to accept that there is nothing natural. Everything has to be artificially imposed on us. So as I go back, the first thing in understanding good and bad is to acknowledge that there is a problem with us. The problem of understanding the true nature of things. Understanding that there is a law of nature. And that law of nature on its own is enough to confer us the knowledge of what is good and what is bad. So that would be my response. This is a quick response. But to illustrate this and to actually get into the law of dharma is a very, very profound theory or philosophy that quite interweaves with the way that we lead our day-to-day lives. There will be a state, I have seen such people, that you don't have to go and refer Upastamba Sutram. The way I cook, I will know what is good way of cooking. The way I serve food, I will know what is a good way of serving. The way I speak, I will know what is a good way of speaking. Nobody has to teach me. And that is when you are one with nature. And that nature is actually Bhagavan himself. He has himself pervaded இல்லையா? அந்த ஸ்டேட்ல போய் நம்ம நேச்சரை பார்த்து அனுபவிச்சோம்னா automatically you will know what is good and what is bad.
But couldn't you also use a role model to understand what's good and what's bad?
Yes. So I was coming to that. So what I told you is the path adopted by jnanis. Okay. The way that if you go and approach a jnani and ask him what is good or what is bad, they step back and read the law of nature and they get the solution. But for ordinary people, we have to look up to role models. அதுதான் பகவானே சொல்லியிருக்கார் that one who is a yadhyadacharati shresthaha tattadeve taro janaha sayat pramanam kurute lokas tadanuvartate. What a role model does in society, a role model actually is a shrestha purusha, one who understands this law of nature. We have to actually seek such role models. In the absence, if all the Smriti Granthas, if all the terabytes of digital data on Smritis is lost, will Dharma survive? The answer is yes, because it is there in the law of nature. It's not there in any archives or textbooks. And if we have any role models that who have actually seen and enjoyed this, then such people are worthy of following. Following in another, we have to take a leaf out of their books. We should get closer to them, observe them, how they lead a life without any conflict with nature. then we will know what is good and what is bad. I think I've taken up some time there. I hope that lays the fabric. I wouldn't say it has answered the question. It is actually a way of approach, how we can start thinking as to how to approach this problem of good versus bad. I hope it was useful to Venkat, Muthu, and Hiranmai here.
Sure, definitely.
Okay. So with that, we'll conclude our session today. Maybe we will just chant these 2 slokas today. And then with the next class, we can look at the chanting for the whole chapter.
Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha. Atha Shodashodhyayah Daivasura Sampadvibhagayogaha. Shri Bhagavanuvacha Abhayam Sattvasham Suddhihi Jnana-yoga-vyavasthitihi Danam Damascha Yajnascha Swadhyayastapa Arjavam Ahimsa Satyam-akrodha Styaga-shantirapayishunam Daya Bhuteshvalo Luptvam Martavam Hirachapalam Rucharanambuja Nirbhara Bhakta Guru Charanambuja Nirbhara Bhakta Samsarada Chiradbhava Mukta Guru Charanambuja Krishna Krishna Sendriya Manasa Niyamadevam Rakshasi Nija Hridayastham Devam Bhaja Govindam Bhaja Govindam Govindam Bhaja Kayena vacha manasa indriyaiva buddhya va prakate sabhavat karomi yat sakalam parasmai
Narayanaye samarpayami.
Sarvam Shri Krishna.
Have a great day and day.
Thank you. Have a lovely day.
Ram Ram.
Namaskaram.
Namaskaram.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Namaskaram.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaskaram. Thank you.